Is this, as you see it, as the White House sees it, an invasion?
Look, Brianna, we think this is, yes, the beginning of an invasion, Russia's latest invasion into Ukraine, and you're already seeing the beginning of our response.
Okay, so there you have it. The White House Principal Deputy National Security Advisor John Feiner says it's an invasion, referring to the developments of the last 24 hours or so, which we will go into. Bear in mind that this is an evolution from yesterday when the Biden administration had avoided using the term invasion, but they don't avoid it now. John Feiner goes on to say, an invasion is an invasion, and that is what is underway. So what are they referring to there? Well, US officials are denouncing Russian President Vladimir Putin's decision to recognize two breakaway republics, Donetsk and Luhansk, in eastern Ukraine as independent areas, and then will send Russian troops there for peacekeeping operations in the regions. So that is what they are saying is effectively, with a little bit of rhetorical cover, an invasion of portions of disputed Ukrainian territory. So we're gonna get into a lot more of the consequences of this, but Yasmin, first of all, were you surprised by Putin's move yesterday? What do you think about it?
Not really surprised, but first I do want to commend you on your pronunciation of these Ukrainian districts. That was pretty good.
Thank you, I tried.
What's interesting about a lot of what's happening too is the rhetoric that's involved with it. Calling something an invasion versus a not invasion, and Putin saying this is a peacekeeping mission versus what it actually looks like to the international community, specifically the US and the NATO participating countries. I'm not really surprised that it has happened. He had to really have done something. He's been moving his troops over to the border for months, since almost a year, I think, since last year. So for him to just retreat, I think would have been unreasonable for anyone to expect.
Yeah, well, look, I think that there would have been domestic political repercussions. I would have found it. I would have been able to find a way to find it reasonable, were he to not invade a country.
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons why he shouldn't do what he seems like he's about to do, but it seems like he's going to do it anyway.
Yeah. So look, he's going to continue to say, look. Vladimir Putin is never going to stand on a massive stage with huge flags behind him and say, "Let the invasion commence." That's not how that works. By the way, that's not how the US goes about invading countries when we periodically do so. They're of course going to lay sort of the mythological groundwork for it, which they've been doing for some time in Russian state media about how it really is a part of us and they really would be better off if they were to have us. And then making it about the eventual potential someday membership to NATO, which is it has no, there's nothing about now that makes it justifiable to invade based on the vague fears that someday there's nothing happening now about them getting into NATO. So look, there's a lot of BS. We've experienced this as Americans before, generally being told to us by our own government, and there's plenty of misinformation in this situation coming from our own government. But let's just be very clear about what is happening. This is at the very least an invasion of those territories that potentially could be the springboard for invasions into other territories. And I will say in advance, because already this morning on Twitter, I've been told multiple times that I'm a warmonger. Couldn't be clearer that I'm against the war. Don't understand what that's a reference to. And I will say that all these people making these comments on Twitter seem to be big followers of so-called anti-imperialists that very much are in favor of this exact invasion happening right now. So there's a lot of irony going around on social media. Let me be clear, pointlessly, because it'll never be acknowledged, I don't want this war or any war. Let's be very clear about that. I'm an actual anti-imperialist, not just opposed to American imperialism. So anyway, I don't want to drag you into all that, Yasmin. That is my weird social media crux that I have to bear. But I will say, and I want to get your response to this, Biden has ordered new sanctions on those disputed territories. So what does that mean? Well, there can be no new investments in the regions of Donetsk and Luhansk by US citizens. So that is I'm gonna have to fundamentally change my investment strategy for the next year or so. Importing goods from the regions into the US can't happen. Exporting goods to the regions from the US or by any US citizen can't happen. Look, I'm making light of my own point of view. Obviously, this is significant. Germany also, by the way, halted the approval of gas pipeline Nord Stream 2, which is a very significant $11 billion pipeline, would potentially double the flow of Russian gas into Germany. So that certainly seems significant, Yasmin. What do you think?
There's a lot going on here with these sanctions. So the sanctions were hopefully going to be the thing that prevented Putin from doing anything that we didn't want it to do, right? He's had a lot of sanctions levied against him since 2014 when he first invaded Crimea. Those sanctions have done a lot of damage to the Russian economy, but they're saying now if he invades any further that they would have more sanctions on the energy sector of Russia. And that could actually be crippling because most of Russia's revenue and their economy is propped up almost entirely by their oil and gas industry, by their natural gas, right? They export to to Western Europe. They get a lot of revenue from that. And Western Europe, in turn, is dependent on Russian oil and gas. So there's a lot going on there. The previous sanctions did not take energy into consideration. They're saying these new ones might or could, but there's another aspect to all this too, is Russia, they've kind of been throttling the gas that they've been delivering to Western Europe for a few months now. And what that's been doing is creating an artificial demand and boosting the price of natural gas and oil in Western Europe. And it's hitting different countries a lot worse than it is certain countries. What that means though, is that if Russia decided to completely cut off oil and gas to Western Europe, they could probably survive for a few months based on all the additional revenue that they've gotten from inflating the price for the past few months. So there's a lot going on, a lot to consider. The sanctions hopefully will do something, but Russia also expected these sanctions. They knew that they were coming. So it'll be interesting to see what their response is now to those.
Yeah, and I also, these particular new sanctions specifically on that region, I don't know in comparison to the bulk of the sanctions that had already been in place or had been threatened. This seems insignificant in comparison to that. I don't know for sure, but that would be my non-expert read. Stopping the pipeline could be significant. You do have to separate sort of like short or medium term consequences from long term consequences. I think long term, that is potentially more harmful to some of these oligarchs than in the short term. They're saying in response, we're just going to cut the supply even more and drive up the price. Which, I mean, this is again, these are the sorts of things that were being threatened. Apparently, those on the Russian side have made the calculation that this is okay, that whatever other interests they're pursuing are more valuable to them. And it is always a little bit weird when you talk about sanctions designed to hurt these like mega multimillionaires and like it's going to hurt them, but in such a abstract fashion. Putin is going to still be the most wealthy person arguably on the planet afterward. Like, sure, they do have dragon sickness. They would love for those fake numbers that don't mean anything to have more zeros at the end. But it's also like the sanctions always end up hurting the people at the bottom more. These are kind of targeted towards oil and gas, maybe not as much in this case, but it's like the first quasi-diplomatic economic tool that's used. And it's one that just always seems so abstract in the way that it would affect the actual decision makers in international situations like this.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And it's not beyond reasonable doubt to think that Putin really maybe doesn't care very much how this affects the people of Russia right now immediately. And what we're seeing in parts of Europe already is the people are suffering because of what Russia is doing with the gas. And particularly in Germany, I was reading an article, I think it was in the New York Times actually, they were saying that a lot of the people there, they simply can't afford their energy costs anymore, their energy bills. People are having to sacrifice on food and personal care items because they need to afford their energy. And this is in the middle of winter. I think, you and I can probably forget that because we're in Texas and Los Angeles, but it's winter in Europe right now. And people are having to burn like actual wood in their fireplaces. And I don't know about you, but I don't have a wood burning stove in my house. I have a gas oven, or not an oven, a gas fireplace right now, but I have a remote control to turn it on. So if the power goes out, I can't even get like a fire in my fireplace.
Or if the batteries go out in the remote control.
Yeah. So it's very problematic. Totally. And I think the bigger issue here is that people are beginning to realize how monopolistic these state-run services that we rely on to live our lives are. And it's a little scary because we don't really have any other options to get things like energy, things like oil and gas to power our homes without if Russia decides to cut it off, what are we going to do?
Yeah, and of course, look, my response would be, and this is not in any way helpful to the situation right now, but long term, add this to the list of reasons that we need to transfer over to, renewable energy. It's going to be very hard in 100 years to cut off someone's access to wind and solar. I mean, it can be done, but it would take a really big umbrella. So
yeah, and we're starting to see that. Yeah, in parts of Europe, we are starting to see people installing more solar panels and things like that. But solar panels are also expensive up front. At least.
They are, which is why that's the sort of thing that definitely, both at the sort of industry level as well as the individual consumer level, is going to require a good bit of government subsidies to get us along the way.
Right.
Especially like that is what subsidies are supposed to be for. Industries that are still in sort of their young phase. The fact that we're still subsidizing oil and gas when they've been around for so long is obviously ridiculous. In any event, I did want to acknowledge the response to these developments coming from Vladimir Zelensky, who said that the country is not afraid and will not concede anything to anyone, which is the sort of thing you would want your president to say, whether it is true or not, perhaps even more so if it's not. It is obviously very scary for a lot of people. And by the way, it's not to say that there aren't any people in these, these rebel-held territories that aren't in favor of this. I mean, obviously there are some. I'm not an expert. I don't know what it breaks down in terms of the polling or whatever, but there are a lot of people that are also very scared about what the potential next steps could be. And the next steps might come in a week, but those territories have been fought over for a number of years at this point. Like, it is possible that there could be an expansion of these territories, further invasions that happen in a week, but it could also happen in 5 years. I would be very worried about the future if I was living in that area.
Yeah, and I did see something that potentially the US would prefer if Russia invaded now, because if they do it now, we can just get it over with, as opposed to if they don't, then they can do it anytime, at any point. So Vladimir Putin has always been pretty vocal about the fact that he always considered Ukraine a part of Russia. And he was pretty upset that it's its own country, and he's saying they're not supposed to be, which is similar rhetoric that we've heard before with other authoritarians who have justified invading other countries. Exactly. I won't say who.
100%. Yeah. I mean, look, sometimes they will just say it's, I need buffer space. Sometimes it's for national security reasons, and those sorts of arguments have been used by Russia in this case as well. Sometimes it's no, but they're true to us. It's truly like, these are our people. And sometimes they will send people into the region to later justify using that sort of myth making. In any event, very briefly, you're gonna hear a lot about this as the situation develops. And in our top 10 list that we did yesterday, we were responding to Robert Reich's 10 reasons to have hope for the midterms. One of them was, if this conflict does develop, as obviously horrific as that is for a number of reasons, hey, maybe from Biden's point of view, everyone will rally around the flag. And I know some people have thought that might be why Biden is, I don't know, like, they see it as like trying to start a fight there. I don't see that. I see he wants to spend a ton of money, but not fight.
For more political news, breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.